Hello, BookTube. This summer I revived an old habit of mine of going to the store and buying the New York Sunday Times every week. I did it at first just because I happened to go into this store and I happened to notice that they sold the Sunday Times. And then one morning this summer I just happened to think, well, why don't you go and do that? Why don't you just go and... You haven't bought the New York Sunday Times in a long time. You used to go through it. I used to read it religiously every week. And so I did, and I thought it would be just a novelty, a one-off thing. And instead, I have really enjoyed reviving this habit. I have really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed the piece of taking in the news. The New York Sunday Times is an enormous production. It takes hundreds of people to do. Tons and tons of great writing, tons and tons of mediocre writing, tons and tons of infuriating writing, all in this one bundle with great visuals and an endless variety for $6. In addition to which, in the heart of the New York Sunday Times book review is the New York Sunday Times is the New York Sunday Times book review, which is the sort of marquee venue of my own profession of book reviewing. It's where you can brag that you had your book reviewed there, and you can also brag that you had a review run there. So, of your own, that you wrote a review that ran there. I had pieced along for years, following links on Twitter and social media to various reviews on the book review without actually sitting down to read the book review itself. And then for a while, there's a bookstore over on the other side of town, the Brookline Booksmith, which sells for $2 a piece the book review itself without the paper. For a long time, the Harvard Bookstore in Cambridge also did that. And I used to make a point of, when I was anywhere near there, I used to make a point of going in and collecting, take 2 or 3 book reviews and buy them all at once and read them all at once. It wasn't practical to do on a weekly basis. It certainly wasn't the point of a pilgrimage or anything. I'd often thought also of maybe subscribing to the electronic Sunday Times and just getting it that way. But I'm glad that I didn't, because taking the physical paper and sitting down with my breakfast on a Sunday morning and reading it has had a wonderful calming effect on my news consumption everywhere else. There is an awful suck hole called Twitter where it is possible to use Twitter correctly. It's possible to use it in positive ways that make you feel good at the end of a day. But it's really rare. Twitter mainly makes you want to feel terrible. It is mainly an acid bath. And one of the main ways that it does that is to present you with hot takes and bullet points of news. The sole effect is to make you just furiously outrageous without any benefit at all, without any upside, and also without any context. And I found that when I was reading the New York Sunday Times, I read it from front to back. I read every word, even of the articles that I don't particularly find interesting or understand, just to absorb them. And so that I read the paper lovingly, slowly, without any other social media on, without anything happening. It's just me, a plate of steamed rice, some spinach, and the Sunday Times, and a tall glass of orange juice, and the bean. That has been wonderful. That curating my news intake like that has been a smart thing to do. It's made me feel wonderful, much better. It's also decreased the amount of trolling that I do on Twitter, except for rare times where I get caught up in a vortex, and you'll be able to tell. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll be able to tell right away if I'm in one of those vortexes, because instead of retweeting or commenting happy, funny things, I will be angry. And there's no point whatsoever to being angry on Twitter, but it sucks you in. So I've kept up this habit. And the one thing that I didn't anticipate when I started this originally, making videos and telling you about it, because of course I don't do anything reading related without telling you about it now. it's just talking about an ingrained habit. The one thing I didn't anticipate would be what would happen if a Sunday Times made me as angry as Twitter does. Then I would have no recourse whatsoever, and that happened last week for 2 reasons. Last week, there were 2 mass shootings in America, and one of them happened 9 or 10 hours after the other, after the Sunday New York Times had been sent to the printer at 1 in the morning. So when I got the Sunday New York Times last Sunday, I knew more about one additional mass shooting in America than even the Times knew about. And that was so depressing. That was so depressing and so angering that it ruined the front section of the paper for me. And when I was reading it originally, I was thinking, okay, well, can you maybe salvage a video for your friends about just the book review last week? So I turned to the book review, and one of the books that was reviewed in the book review last week was Kathleen Hale is a Crazy Stalker by Kathleen Hale, a collection of essays that should never have been bought or published by Grove Atlantic. Grove Atlantic, it was a pan of a review, but it doesn't matter. Not only should Grove Atlantic not have published a book about a woman who crossed the country to stalk and track down someone who left a negative review of a book of hers in order to leave something on that woman's doorstep. In real life, in the real world, not to ring the bell and talk to her about it, but to leave something on that doorstep. The something, in this case, was a book. And as I've been telling people since the day that story broke, the book was a bomb. There is absolutely no difference except in the explosion part. But all the purpose of doing that, the mania involved in buying a ticket to an airplane, of flying across the country, of tracking down the real-world details of this person's job and family and street address, all of that is the same, regardless of what the parcel is, and also the intended result is the same. The intended result was not an explosion. It was also not reading a book. It was terror. It was to instill terror. It was to tell the person who left that review, see, I can reach you, so you better watch what you say in the future. It's a scandal that Grove Atlantic took this book and published it. And it's a scandal that this woman has not been ostracized from society or brought up on criminal charges. And it's also a scandal that the New York Times decided to run a review of it. It doesn't matter, and everybody at the New York Times knows this. It doesn't matter if it was a pan. You've already given all the victory to this Kathleen Hale creature that you possibly can by reviewing her book in the Sunday New York Times. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, any more than it matters whether it was a book or a bomb. The point is elsewhere in the story. And I know the people at the New York Times Book Review, the editorial staff, knew that, and they had to make that decision anyway. They just had to decide anyway. We're going to do this anyway. And as you can tell, that infuriated me. Both those things infuriated me to such a point that I made a video, a walkthrough video, just like this one, about last week's Sunday Times. And when I watched it, I thought, nobody comes to this channel to see this at all. Fun ranting is one thing, but that video was 35 minutes of not fun ranting. So I just didn't upload it. That's all. But this week, thank God, that is not true. There are no, in my opinion, criminal travesties reviewed in the New York Times Book Review this week. And the news, although on the front section of the paper, although it is largely bad or infuriating, is not anywhere near as bad or as infuriating as it was last week. So I thought we'd go through the front section first before we get to the book review. The front section, the front page of the New York Times Book Review is prime real estate. It is the most prime real estate anywhere in the news world. So you have to look at what they choose to do. And the front and center thing is an article by Joe Becker called The New Nativists. The title of the piece is How Nationalism Found a Home in Sweden. But this isn't really about nationalism. It's about alt-right nationalism. It's about extremist, exclusionary nationalism, the pathological kind. And the article is extremely long. It is either the premise for a book that Joe Baker is going to write, or it's a blatant, hello, I'm right here announcement for the Pulitzer. But one way or another, it was fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Sweden, of course, has this largely unexamined common characterization as an idyllic place of peace and tranquility. So for the alt-right to fetch up there and start converting people is, of course, a dramatic turn on which the story can hang, and it does. And that is right in the front and center above the fold. Right next to it is an article by Samir Yassir, Suhani Raj, and Jeffrey Gettleman on the worsening situation in Kashmir. But on the other side, of course, this is coming. On the other side of the front page is a story about the suicide of Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted pedophile who had been jailed in a federal prison in Manhattan, who had tried to kill himself and was put on suicide watch, and then I guess he said the right things at his daily psych evaluation, so was taken off suicide watch and managed to kill himself in federal custody. Almost impossible to do. Every inmate from that same facility who has gone on record in the last few days has said there is no way that you could do this. No way at all. Whether you're on suicide watch or not, it's impossible to do without help. And of course, the minute that the news broke, I mean, Epstein he was in jail, he was in a perfect position to start naming names, and those names would be powerful people. So speculation started immediately on Twitter that he had been murdered. And a couple of commentators pointed out that in this case, unlike most political cases in America, the far left and the far right were in complete harmony. They both believe that someone murdered this guy. Whether you believe it was Trump or whether you believe it was the Clintons, somebody had him killed. According to the theories that are still bouncing all around the internet. Of course, it stopped me cold when I learned about it, because Trump's Attorney General, William Barr, is connected to Jeffrey Epstein. His family, his father, is connected to Jeffrey Epstein personally. They know each other personally. It had unwanted echoes for me of the Reagan assassination attempt by John Hinckley, who was personally known to the Bush family, one of whose members would have become president if the assassination had succeeded. That always bugged me, and if there had been Twitter at the time, that's all Twitter would have been talking about then. And this is the same way. Barr is connected to Epstein, not necessarily through scandal. He may not be one of the powerful people whose names are going to start to come out. I guarantee you these names are still going to come out, whether Epstein is dead or alive. He may not be one of those people, but it's possible that his father is, and one way or another, they are close enough involved to... It just stinks to high heaven. So, of course, the Times has to put this on the front page. And the front page reporting here in the Times is mostly just about the suicide. And how could this happen in a federal institution? And how could it happen to someone who had tried to kill himself only just recently? How is this possible? It seems to strain credulity to say that this was incompetence. It seems much worse than that. It's only when you get, a dozen pages in that the Times also reports that one of those wild conspiracy theories about the Clintons killing Jeffrey Epstein to shut him up was retweeted by the President of the United States. Wild-eyed tinfoil hat conspiracy theories being retweeted, in other words, endorsed. No matter what anybody says, if you retweet something, you endorse it. I can't stand it when people say otherwise in their Twitter profile when they say retweets aren't endorsements. Okay, good for you. Good. If you want to think that, that's fine. But you're wrong. The President of the United States retweeting this kind of junk for the whole world about a former president. Just cartoonishly stupid and evil. Just cartoonishly so. But those were the three things above the fold. And below the fold were two items that equally managed to infuriate Steve. The first one was by Anna Swanson, and it's an article with the title, Democrats Pledge to Alter Trade. Problem, Trump beat them to it. And the whole article, I read it right through to the jump, the whole article is about how Democrats have for years been saying that all sorts of American trade agreements with other nations are off-kilter, unfair, myopic, poorly structured, and that if they become president, they will do something about it. And the gist of the article is that Trump has taken he's taken the teeth out of those promises by doing it himself. And that is totally wrong. The Democrats want to reform U.S. trade. What Trump has done is not that. The Democrats want to attack the problem of U.S. trade through negotiation, through interpretation of data, through manipulation of currency, through manipulation of trade barriers, porous and otherwise. Donald Trump wants to throw tantrums. He has wrecked U.S. trade. He hasn't analyzed it or done anything to renovate it or make it more just. He's had two goals in mind. To attack foreign leaders that he doesn't sort of like, or that he doesn't like the look of, if you know what I mean, and to enrich himself. That is not what the Democrats planned to do. So Trump has not stolen a page from their book. They still have plenty of work to do on U.S. trade. The only difference is now, if a Democrat is ever elected again, they're going to have to deal first with undoing all of the damage that Donald Trump has done to U.S. trade. They're going to have to undo all of that first and build relationships again. Nobody in the world trusts America now. Nobody trusts anything that our diplomats or negotiators say in any context ever, because it can be contradicted the next day by the President of the United States. So all of that is going to have to be, if Democrats ever come to power again, they're going to have to deal with that first. But then, yeah, trade problems will come next, but it won't be that they'll be following on from grand sensei Donald Trump. And then the other thing on the front page, before we go to the book review, is an article written by Julie Bossman, Kate Taylor, and Tim Arango about the mass shooters who are now a permanent fixture of American society, and also their motivations, their manifestos, the videos, and the written materials they leave behind. The article is Many Gunmen in Mass Shootings Share a Hatred Toward Women. And I read that and thought, yeah, you think? Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. The article is a bit of a blur, I have to admit. These three authors, I guess, weren't FaceTiming enough with each other, because it's a bit of a blur. It goes from mass shooters and also other kinds of criminals who were domestic abusers of their wives to incels, and doesn't really seem to care whether or not those two are connected, and if so, how. The fact that these things are radically opposite things should lead these authors, or maybe one of the three of them, to think that maybe there's a cause underneath this that does unite the two of them. Those of you who may be fortunate enough not to know the term, incel stands for involuntary celibate. And it is a large group of pasty-faced young white men who consider themselves incels and grouse online about how women won't give them sex. They really want it. They've tried to make this clear to women that, you know, this one and only thing that you're on earth to do, I want that, and you won't give it to me. And if you won't give it to me, then what's your purpose? What are you even doing here? You want to feel a kind of oily, slick soil all over your soul that a shower cannot remove. Why you'd want to feel that, I don't know, but it's the 21st century. You want to feel that? Start watching some incel YouTube videos. You will be amazed. You will be amazed. Incels take the misogyny that is, in fact, the unifying feature of the entire breadth of the alt-right. The alt-right disagrees about everything under the sun except for that. Except for that. And there are some members of the alt-right who will say, well, obviously you're wrong. Obviously I'm not a misogynist. I'm married. That's not exactly how it works. But incels take that misogyny and just, they take it to warp 10. The misogyny is baked right into their worldview. They don't even trouble anymore. They don't pause for a minute to hate women for being secondary and lesser creatures, odd ancillary forms of life that exist to serve and pleasure men. They don't even pause for a second to state that. That is baked in to their view. What they're upset about is that, given that fact, why aren't women paying them any attention? They have, oh my God, their world is so detailed. I have spent so much time studying incels because, not only because, you know, they're morbidly interesting. I find them morbidly interesting. They all say the same thing. They all talk about Chad. Chad is an incel code word for a typical Hollywood bohunk guy, broad shoulders, wavy hair, bright smile, you know, all the standard masculine traits. Incels hate Chad. They absolutely hate him, because he's the one who's stealing their women. he's the one who women go for. Since women are now have the vote, and they can work, and they can wear clothing, and they can leave the kitchen, they have the freedom to choose whatever man they want. And if they have that kind of freedom, they're going to choose the best man. And where does that leave all the incels in the world? I would never talk to an incel. If I ever have and I didn't know that the incel was one, I'm sorry. They shouldn't be talked to. They should just be shot into space. But if I were to talk to an incel, I would have all sorts of questions about that, because that is just patently ridiculous. I am not a Chad, and I never have been, for instance. And I have never been an incel. I know a whole bunch of people who've never been Chads, and they've never been incels. You might want to try making yourself likable to women. That might help a lot. It might be that the reason that women aren't walking up to you and offering sex with you is because you're kind of creepy and you don't blink when you talk. But I thought the article was very interesting. I just thought it was a little unfocused. I think there's a resurgence of just the most spitting, hateful, virulent misogyny And it's a resurgence all over the world. It backs a lot of the resurgent fundamentalist religious movements all over the world. It's the one thing they all have in common. It animates this new, vicious, cancerous version of the Republican Party in America, which is all over the map about all sorts of things, and from federal aid to redistricting of cities to sponsorship and opportunity programs. The one thing that all of the Republican Party has in common is that they hate women. They would like, even the women, the few women in their ranks, they would like women to have no vote, no ability to work in any job that a man wants to work. If any man applies, even an incel, he gets the job if his only competition is women. And really, not much in the way of freedom. The dream at the back of most of today's frothing at the mouth Republicans is a world in which when you marry Mary Reingold, she becomes Mrs. John Smith. She loses not only her last name, but her first name. They look back to a world in the 1940s or whenever they think we were cast out of the Garden of Eden, in which that was the way things were with women, where you could love them and you could admire them for how beautiful and delicate they are. They could not earn more than you. And they could not have their own name or keep it once they were married to you. And if they got out of line, or if the dinner was a little late, maybe you could slap them around a little. That's what guys do, right? Some of us thought that we were getting rid of those attitudes in the 1970s. Some of us actually thought that. And it was bloody well overdue. And they're all coming back. All those attitudes are coming back now. I know lots of young people who... anyway. Incels have a gigantically detailed world. Oh my God. The more you learn about it, the more pathetic it is. You should see the things that exercise their attention, that concentrate their mania. This, right here. How thick your wrist is, right here. There are 1,000-page manifestos in the incel world about this, right here. About how thick your wrist is, right here. They go on and on about how exercise can make this thicker, and exercise can make this thicker, but nothing can do anything about this, and women look straight at that. And if it's too thin, they won't give you sex. They look at this area right here. Does your nose jut out from your face? Do you have a brow or a brow ridge of any kind? There's something you can do if you don't. There's no plastic surgery that will work. Chads have that, and incels don't, and women look straight at it. Never mind that these same women might be dating Steve Buscemi. Never you mind that one wonderful woman has been married to Danny DeVito for 50 years. Never mind. No, it has nothing to do with how you treat women. Whether or not you make them laugh, whether or not you find them interesting and let them know that, whether or not you find them your equal, whether or not you like having fun together, has nothing to do with any of that. No, that's Chad speak. No, it has to do with this and this. I'm laughing because it's kind of funny. In any previous generation, these creatures would have been scorned even by the school nerd. I mean, you're in high school and in college, the school nerd still got a little action if he was courteous. These creatures are even below that. The only reason why it's not actually a laughing matter is because America is swimming up to its eyeballs in guns. So these creatures can take out their grievances on the world with high-powered weapons that are trivially easy for them to acquire. That suddenly makes incels all of our problem, and it makes them a little less funny. But that was the front section of the paper. There are a whole bunch of other sections. I had a great time. With the rest of the paper. There was a whole section, for instance, in the magazine on the 50th anniversary, or no, it was a section in the paper on the 50th anniversary of Woodstock, where Deb and I conceived and discarded so many of our children. But I want to go, now that I'm done with the news of the day and ranting, I want to go to the book review. This is the book review this time around. And it had all the usual features. It had a letters column that was kind of interesting. It had the buy the book feature, where the Times talks to an author and asks them a set of preset questions. And this time the author is Jia Tolentino, who has a book of... I think her publisher wants to call them essays, called Trick Mirror, which has intrigued me. I have it here on the shelf. I haven't actually got to it yet. But I've had a sort of impression of her. I guess I unfairly was tarring her book with this impression. I had a kind of impression of her. I have a bit of a suspicion whenever a young author, male or female, looks like a TV star. If a very young author in their 20s looks like a TV star, then a part of me thinks they were advanced in their career by the fact that they look like a TV star. That's probably not fair. Although I've read all of their books, and a lot of times, I can draw some sort of inverse relationship between how attractive the author is, male or female, and how undercooked the book is. I don't know. I have no idea. There's a larger theory involved with, the nerdish, bookish types of the publishing industry finally getting to hang out with the cool kids. I don't know how far I would want to push it. But boy, oh boy, if I had a kind of nebulous instinct against Jia Tolentino along those lines, it was dispelled by the book thing. Her answers are incredible. They're just incredible. I'll read you just a couple of them. One in particular just got to me. She talks about they ask her, what's the best book you've ever received as a gift? I don't do really books as gifts, but her answer is charming. She says, my boyfriend got me a first edition of Sherwood Anderson's Winesburg, Ohio, one of my favorite books of all time, about 7 years ago. And this past year, he gave me a copy of Eve's Hollywood with a note in it for me from Eve Babbitts herself. I almost keeled over on the spot. I love that. That is so humanizing. But this is the answer that really got to me. And it'll get to a lot of you as well, I'm sure. What kind of reader were you as a child? Which childhood books and authors stick with you the most? And this is her answer. I would read while rollerblading around my neighborhood. Read while eating. Read in the car. Read in the bathtub. My books were stained, swollen, ripped to shreds. I was always just desperate to be constantly reading. So Jia Tolentino has won me over, and now I will go at her book with a totally different mind frame. I hate it when that happens. But anyway, the main gist of the impression I got of the book review this time around was a trial. It was a bit of a trial to read, not in the same way as Kathleen Hale getting a review in the Sunday New York Times when she should have a cop at her door instead, but trying in the way that I feel because I am a book reviewer. I am a professional book reviewer, and I review books all the time for a whole bunch of venues, and that creates a kind of butterflies in the stomach feeling when you go to a venue like the New York Times, which wouldn't allow me to deliver water to the back alley, let alone write a review for them. They don't want the likes of me. But when I get to a venue like the New York Times, and I see that it has books in it that are reviewed that I have also reviewed, then you get a kind of butterfly in the stomach feeling. Because is the reviewer going to catch something big that you missed? Or are they going to disagree with you in a convincing way? Are they going to make a better case against the book or for the book than you made for it or against it? It's fascinating. Those of you maybe who've done it will know what I mean. But there were quite a few examples of that in this book review. First one, very happy to see. John Taliaferro, a fantastic biographer, did a book. Excuse me, I'm just going to belch my way right through here. He did a book on George Bird Grinnell, a pioneering American preservationist, land preservationist, ecologist, really a brave guy who to whom America owes a lot. Americans who enjoy the natural outdoors, the natural parks, every summer, for instance, owe a lot to Bird Grinnell and don't even know it. They don't know his name at all. Unlike John Muir, his name has completely vanished. And Taliaferro's biography of him is terrific, just terrific. And it's reviewed here by Timothy Egan. There's a book coming out, a new book coming out in October. And the review is really good up until the very end. I want to read. In giving Grinnell his due, Taliaferro, a former senior editor at Newsweek, could have put his manuscript on a diet. There is far too much detail about the peripheral matters that do little to enhance the character or his passions. The story often lacks momentum. He is coy, annoyingly so, about whether Grinnell, who married late in life, might have been gay. There's much hinting of Brokeback Mountain intimacy in the great outdoors among manly men of means. I don't even know what to do with a paragraph like that. So it wasn't long enough, except you want it to be longer. The book was too long, but you'd be willing for it to be longer if it has baseless speculation of a sexual nature. I don't even know what that paragraph is doing there. It's simultaneously telling the reader that the book is too long. It most certainly is not. It is a masterpiece of biographical writing. But this paragraph is simultaneously telling readers that the book is too long and telling them that the author is annoyingly coy in not speculating about Bert Grinnell's sexuality, like anybody cares. And it was a little annoying, that's all. I mean, it was 50-50. I was very glad to see the book get a full-page review in the Times. That's wonderful. That will result in sales of a book that otherwise wouldn't have them. But I was annoyed. There are other things to criticize the book for. A certain piousness, for instance, a certain pietistic tone towards the naturalist movement of the 21st century. But you can't fault the book because it doesn't speculate on the guy's sexuality. That just is not fair. And then, let's see here. There's another book that's reviewed that I reviewed. Who's the author here? Udajit Batterjee, who I don't know. I don't know that name at all. He reviews Anita Anand's The Patient Assassin, about the Amritsar massacre and about the long follow-up of a man who decided years later to avenge it, to shoot the official who was involved, who ordered the Amritsar massacre. And The Patient Assassin I thought was absolutely terrific. And I wrote a review of it, and I thought, oh my, is this reviewer going to find something wrong with it? Is this reviewer not going to like it? But it turns out it's a very positive review. So that was, phew, I was very happy about that. Then there was a whole page review of This Land Is Our Land by Suketu Mehta. The review is by Lauren Markham, who, again, I don't know. It's a very long review, and it is also very positive. It's very intelligent, a very meaty review, just the kind of thing that I come to the New York Times Book Review for. Lauren Markham has a lot more space at her disposal than I did. I wrote a review of this for an unlikely venue. I wrote a review of it for the Martha's Vineyard Gazette, because Suketu Mehta he's taking part in the Martha's Vineyard Book Festival, or did already. I think he might have already done it, but we had in the Gazette we had a special feature, a special pull-out feature about the book festival. A whole bunch of writers interviewed authors and wrote sort of profiles of them, and also there were book reviews. I wrote a book review, just a straight-up book review of This Land Is Our Land, a book that I really enjoyed. So I was great. I was, again, very happy to see it get a full-page review. Then there was a review of a book by Alexei Zentner called Copperhead. I read it and didn't like it at all. I thought there was nothing there at all. I thought it was just sat there on the page. But it gets a review. It's only half a page in the book review. And that might have annoyed me, but the review is by Smith Henderson, who wrote a book called 4th of July Creek. His bio note on the review says he is the author most recently of 4th of July Creek, so I'm assuming he's written nothing else. Boy, oh boy, though, was 4th of July Creek a fantastic novel. What a fantastic contemporary piece of fiction that is. I can't recommend it strongly enough. If you can find it, I think it was a debut, so your library might not have it, but you might be able to find a penny copy on Amazon. But 4th of July Creek, if you're in the mood for, for instance, if you watch this channel and you think, oh, this guy never likes any contemporary fiction, that's actually not true. I read more contemporary fiction than anybody else, including the people whose only job it is to read contemporary fiction, and I like quite a bit of it. I just don't like the artsy-fartsy, half-formed, identity check business, the crap that comes out of workshops, and that's overpraised, much to the detriment of the future career of the authors. I don't know why you're not doing an author a favor by saying this, provoked me to tears, made me divorce my third wife. I went on an all-water diet. Any of this ridiculous overpraise that these trifles get. But 4th of July Creek is not like that. Take my word for it, or download a sample of the ebook and read that. You'll see what I mean right away. So I was happy to see the review, even though I don't think the book deserves it. But then Noah Feldman, who is the Felix Frankfurter Professor of at Harvard Law School, does a full-page review of Stephen Budiansky's new biography of Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., of Justice Holmes. And it's, again, a really good review. You'd expect from an author with those credentials. It's a terrific review, and I also did a review of this book, and I also loved it. And I loved it despite the fact that I have seriously enjoyed most of the other Holmes biographies that have come out in the 20th century. This book had big shoes to fill, and it very wisely decides not to try to fill them. It's just a book on its own right, very peppy, very much written for the 21st century instead of the 20th, good or ill. And I was glad. So again, I was glad that not only to see it get a full review, but also to see it not quite disagree with me. I didn't want to be disagreed with. I didn't get far though before that was ruined, because Julie Meyerson does a review of The Ghost Clause by Howard Norman, his new book about essentially a haunted house in Vermont, and she didn't like it. She criticizes it, and in this case, you know, when a fellow critic writes a review and disagrees with you, there are two ways that they can do it. Either they can see all the same things that you saw and just like them when you didn't, or they can find fault that is not a fault that you found, and then they're either right or wrong. And I think this author is wrong. Yeah, certainly all the elements involved, the erotic comic, the oddball, even the genuinely unsettling, are more than seductive, if only the Ghost Clause built on them to deliver what it at first seems to promise, a spooky and heartfelt tale of love and loss, of two marriages linked by the bones of an old house. Well, I mean, her contention in the course of this review is that the Ghost Clause doesn't deliver that. And I would say two things. First, that's only what it seems to be setting up in the beginning of the book. It actually does deliver on what it wants to deliver on, which is the messy inconclusiveness of marriages, old or new, living or dead. I just think, I think the author, the reviewer, Julie Meyerson, went into the book expecting one thing and just refused to switch gears when she stopped getting it. And that can be dangerous when you go into a novel and you act that way. And I think in this case, it misserves the book. I worry that people are going to read this review and think, oh, well, I might have been on the fence. Howard Norman has pleased me with a couple of his other books, but I won't read this one because it got panned in the Times. That would bother me. But that, believe it or not, is it. That is the book review. There's all the New York, the bestseller list. A couple of you have said, actually a dozen of you have said, that someday I should go through the bestseller list. I flip right over it. The bestseller list is the thing that most people turn to. Certainly people in the industry, they want to see what the bestseller list is for the Times. I skip right over it, but a lot of you have said that you would like my reactions to the New York Times bestseller. Maybe I'll make a separate video, since this one is already at 5 hours long. Maybe I'll make a separate video and just go through the Times bestseller list, just maybe once a month. It doesn't change that much. And then the short list at the end, where an author, this time Michael Callahan, goes over just 3 books. The books are Biloxi by Mary Miller, which I kind of sort of liked. Rules for Visiting by Jessica Francis Kane, which I didn't read. And Home for Erring and Outcast Girls by Julie Kibler, which I didn't read because it has girls in the title. So I wasn't terrifically engaged with that, but I read them anyway. That Michael Callahan does a good job. And that was the book review. The front page of the book review was a review by Angela Flournoy of Sarah Broom's The Yellow House, which I have not read and have not even heard about until I saw it here. So I didn't have any reaction to that, but I had a great time reading the rest of it. But great time or no, nothing justifies a video this long. So I'm going to wrap things up. But I will be back. So I will see you then. Thank you, you long-suffering souls.